Yoo-hoo! Here we go. And okay, good morning to everybody who is watching us on LinkedIn first, then YouTube and Facebook as well. It is my pleasure to welcome today Nanako Aramaki. And together, once again, on this Wednesday morning, we are doing this conversation with Tim Sullivan, or Atami Tim, as people in Clubhouse know him. Well, Nanako, thank you so very much for agreeing to be our guest speaker today. I have been looking forward to this conversation since the moment you said yes. And yes, I'm very excited this morning. I know that Tim is too. And well, I would like to give you the floor immediately without any further ado, because I don't want to take away any of the stories you're going to tell us. And before, well, I say go ahead, I just want to ask you, please do a short introduction of yourself, and then let's dive into the conversation from there. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Maya and Tim, for inviting me on. I'm very excited to be here to share my story. So I am Nanako Aramaki. I am the Chief Localization Officer at Tableau. We're just a little startup content marketing agency based in London and Tokyo. But basically, if you heard me speaking in Japanese and you see my name, you think I'm Japanese. Well, I was born in Tokyo. And when I was 3, my family immigrated to Canada. So I grew up in Canada. I lived in Canada from 3 until, my late 20s. So I was educated in Canada. I had my first marketing career in Canada. I'm actually also a flamenco dancer. So I was already teaching and performing in a dance company in Canada while I was also working as a marketing professional. And I decided to move to Berlin, and I lived in Berlin for 3 to 4 years. And then I also lived in London for 6 years. And then I recently, a few years ago, married a Japanese man. And for many different reasons, we decided to live in Japan. And so I'm here, and I've been here for almost 3 years. And, when Tim and Maya first decided to, ask me to be the speaker, and we were talking about things we could talk about, I was just sharing my story. And you guys thought that being integrated into Japan in such a short period of time was an interesting story, maybe. So I thought maybe I could talk about how I managed to do that in such a short period of time. And while I was taking notes for myself, I was like, oh my God, like I have consciously and also subconsciously really successfully localized myself. And I feel I really love my life in Japan. And I really enjoy my work and also my private life here as well. And so hopefully I can share some tips or something that might be of help. Something useful for people who are also going through the same journey.
Thank you so very much for the introduction, self-introduction. And I'm glad to hear that you are happy with your life in Japan, because, well, I am too. Anyway, but
as am I. Yes, exactly.
Yes, and just the other day I had a meeting with somebody who has recently relocated to Japan as well, and they relocated here after a short period, not a very short one, but a brief period of living here and studying here. And so I actually began the conversation with, well, could you please tell me why you relocated to Japan? Because a lot of foreigners here actually find it difficult to adapt, because we know that, like every country, Japan has its own specifics. Let's say the culture is very specific. I'm not going to say unique, because some people may disagree. But anyway, yes, okay. But yes, I'm really always happy to meet people who are on the same wavelength. At the same time, I would love to hear your insights, and of course, once again, your story. And well, how did you localize? What do you find, or what did you find difficult? Why do you still find it difficult? And so on and so on. And of course, we'll continue. We have several people in Clubhouse already. There will be questions there too. So once those questions and comments come, we'll be transferring them to this platform as well. So yeah. Okay.
I
Yes.
just wanted to add, your story is so fascinating to me because you've lived in all these different cultures,
Mhm.
right? And I can't help but think that jumping into these, like, head first into these cultures and staying there for long enough to learn and adapt must have made you extremely flexible. Like, I'm saying, your brain has just kind of learned how to adapt to all these different, environments. And to me, that's really impressive. And then the other thing I meant, because you mentioned you were from Canada again in your introduction, right? And I was thinking, I think Maya and I are subconsciously biased in our love for Canadians. We have a lot of Canadians on here, and I don't know why. It's not planned. But anyway, go ahead. So I'm so glad we met. I felt like we clicked right away. All three of us. We just had a great conversation. So go ahead and I will listen now.
Okay. Thank you so much. Yeah, Canadians are a bunch of friendly people. So a lot of people ask me, why did you leave Vancouver? Because, Vancouver is a beautiful city. It's great for the outdoors. We have great food, great foodie scene. But like, for me at the time, I was looking for shigeki, I guess, like some more, stimulation. And I just really wanted to live in Europe. And so being in Berlin and having easy access to Europe was really great for me at the time, because I was still younger, and I used up all of my savings on my life there. But I was so lucky that I got to find a job there, part-time, doing marketing and also dancing. Like, I really got to focus on my dance career while I was in Berlin, because cost of living was much lower. Sorry, I will talk about Japan as well. I'm going to get there.
Sure.
But when I was in Berlin, that was the first time I felt like, oh my God, there's so much competition for marketing jobs in English, because almost all Germans in the marketing industry, they're all fluent in English. And so I didn't have enough of like a USP. And I took my first interview for a Japanese position there, and I didn't get it because I obviously don't have any experience doing marketing in Japan. I've never actually lived in Japan at that point, only until I was 3. And so a seed was planted at that time about, possibly integrating Japanese into my professional career. But it's not something that I looked into right away. And so when I moved to London, and I was also still doing marketing and also still dancing, it didn't really occur to me to really make that career switch until I injured myself and I realized that I can't dance full time forever. And so that's when I started to focus on Japanese and using my Japanese and for my job in London. And there were so many interviews, so many opportunities. And I was fortunate enough to be hired at SoftBank in London. And that was my first sort of experience working with Japanese people and using Japanese on a regular basis and learning how Japanese people work. And I know it's different from maybe a traditional Japanese office in Japan, but I think that's what really helped me. So all of these things I'm going to talk about is how I've slowly integrated myself into the culture. Because obviously I grew up in a Japanese family. Both my parents are Japanese. My grandparents lived with us for half a year every year while I was a kid. So I was really exposed to, Japanese culture. My grandmother was a tea ceremony instructor. So, like I was just exposed to all of that. I went to Japanese school once a week, like a lot of foreigners a lot of Japanese people living abroad. So I, could read manga, and I watched TV shows like from the rental video store. I know I'm aging myself by saying that, but yeah, we used to go to the video rental store and get like the weekly drama,
Drama,
like
yeah.
shows and like variety shows recorded on VHS, and watch those. So I felt like I was quite up to date with
Yeah, we did the same thing. My kids.
yeah,
My
yeah,
kids
yeah.
did the same thing. We were in that world. But yeah, go ahead. So that's what I was
But yeah, I felt like that was really important. And it also helped that my grandparents lived with us, and my mother's English was not that great. So like me and my siblings, we were kind of forced to speak Japanese at home, which is the reason why I was able to keep my Japanese. But, it was like cute Japanese. I only spoke with my family. And once I became a shakaijin, I was only working with English speakers. And so I didn't really improve my Japanese until, I met my current husband. So you're both married to Japanese people. So I'm sure that also was a catalyst for your Japanese learning.
They are the best. Spouses are the best language teachers. Absolutely the best. So yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I had to learn how to communicate effectively with him. So, and I had so many questions. I still do. I still have tons of questions for him. And he's been very patient with me and teaching me everything. So I think that's been really helpful. But yeah, working in London with my Japanese colleagues, that's where I first learned that I can't just pull people into a meeting and talk about a project. Like I had to brief them properly and have a briefing document, because they'd be like, I don't understand what you want me to do.
Right. Yes.
And as a North American, I was like, why can't we just talk about it?
Yeah. God, it was years ago. I can't remember who did it, but it was an American. He was writing about Japanese business, and he said Americans are afflicted with, this was his word, announcement-itis.
Okay.
And so we like to just announce something to everybody all at once because it's more efficient. But he said in Japan, you're not announcing. Nobody will be surprised when you make the announcement because you've already talked to people behind the scenes beforehand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's almost like something I learned before going into these meetings and making pronouncements. I would always say, and plus you bounce it off of people and you get feedback, and then you kind of hone your approach. You're like, oh, I didn't think he would take it that way or whatever, So it's kind of an interesting process to learn. Did you kind of go through something like that?
I don't know. I just dove right in. So
you to do it,
Yeah, I mean, it was like little by little also. So like my colleagues in London were so lovely. My boss was really great. And so I didn't have to use Japanese for clients, which was great, because then I first learned how, Japanese people speak to each other, and how to write a business email to colleagues. Because writing to clients is a whole other level of keigo that I wasn't ready to take on. So first it was the otsukaresama desu, type of Japanese first. And also, learning how to communicate with my Japanese colleagues, which was not that hard. But something that I did in London was also watching a lot of Japanese reality TV shows. And my Japanese colleagues at the time were like, those people are not real, like typical Japanese people. And I was like, I don't care. I really love it. And like maybe they're not like the average person in Japan, but I was kind of studying their mannerisms, the vocabulary they were using, kind of observing the trends, because I have not lived in Japan ever, really. So, I wanted to know what it was like, and like what people are wearing, how people interact with each other, even like when they first meet. Like I was watching a lot of Terrace House at the time, and it always I always found it interesting that when they introduce each other, they all announce their age, and that's where they kind of like set the hierarchies, and depending on if the other person is younger or older, they changed their Japanese or speaking style. Like it was keigo or like tameguchi, and like that doesn't happen in English.
I did a lot of Terrace House too, and it was just no, it was mostly kind of as an anthropologist, and of course, a lot of it's fake. I understand that, but still, those conversations, the general idea might be scripted, but they actually are just talking, right? Mm-hmm. And I picked up a lot of words that the youngsters use that I never learned, and so it was kind of an interesting show to learn, right?
Yeah.
So it's interesting you mentioned that.
Yeah, that's how I felt. So I felt like, I was preparing because, I had never lived in Japan as an adult, and it was a dream of mine. And so I just kind of slowly decided to, pick up on Japanese, and maybe one day living in Japan. So I decided to, study watching those shows, and it was really fun. And I think I learned a lot because, of course, I watched, like my mother's mannerisms growing up, like always bowing on the phone, like, I do that too. But, like those kind of things I already knew. And of course, growing up watching, Japanese TV and movies and stuff like that, I knew, and also reading manga. But, like a lot of things change over time. And like a lot of people still tell me like, oh, people don't say that anymore because because I grew up with my mom and my dad's Japanese. Right. Or even better, my grandparents' Japanese. And so, people are like, oh, you're so Showa. Or
right. Like, they used to say, when I was here in the 80s, they'd be like, nawi. It's kind of up to date. Nawi,
Nawi? Okay.
And tondemo happening was another one they used to use a lot. Tondemo happening. And so I don't think anybody says that now. So that was just, that's so funny.
Like the other day, I was like, oh, where's the otearai? And the lady I was with, she's older than me, but she was like, oh, otearai. Like nobody says that anymore. And I was like, what? My mind was blown. I was like, but it's like the washroom. Like people don't say that.
No. And now it's toide. And I remember coming here and hearing toide. And then I thought, gosh, in America, we don't say, I'm going to the toilet. Like nobody really says that except little kids, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting that in Japan, that's an acceptable, I guess, not polite, but, normal way to say it.
A normal term.
Otearai.
Well, I mean, like in the UK, we say toilet too. So.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. So this is something that I thought of in hindsight, because I obviously didn't live in London to prepare myself for my life in Japan. Like I had no idea I was gonna, go in that progression. But I lived in London where people drive on the left side of the road, and I didn't drive because I was a bit scared, but I rode a bike. And so I got used to like navigating streets on the left-hand side. And it was so easy to come to Japan and like, be mindful of cars driving on the left side, or I ride my bike here as most Japanese people do in Japan. And it was super easy to integrate in that sense because I had already done that for 6 years. And also, you may be aware of this, but my first job in London was with a UK NGO, and I worked with a bunch of British people. They were only British people, And I didn't realize until after that what they were telling me was not really how they felt.
Right.
Like my colleague would be like, oh yeah, this is great. This is really great.
Brilliant.
But yeah, brilliant. But maybe you can change this part. And like, yeah, maybe you can work on it a little bit more here. And I'd be like, oh, great feedback. Thank you. Yeah, I can work on it. But then I found out later that he used to complain about me because he didn't like my work.
And how do you get better if you don't get the honest feedback?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, the whole not speaking your honne thing, I think I was already trained on that from when I lived in London.
To that, even in America, I lived in the South for many years, and I have a lot of friends from the South. They are so indirect. Like,
really?
they're so indirect compared to Northerners, right? So even within America, there are pockets. And, you know, a lot of my Southern friends, they never learned to speak Japanese, but they did really well and they made lots of friends here. There was just something endearing about them, and they were into that kind of indirectness. So kind of interesting. Yeah, the British, I guess they're that way too. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's hard to make sort of British friends if you don't know the right people. So I was friends with a lot of Canadians in London, a lot of, you know, expats. And it's such a big city that it's really easy to find your own community. There's a, you know, it's really international. So it was great. But while I was working at SoftBank, we used a marketing agency called Tableau to do our SEO. And so that's where I met my current boss, Yuichi, and James, who runs the London office. And, you know, they were great to work with already at that time. And we had built such a great rapport. That when I decided to move to Japan, it was for many reasons. So COVID happened, and my husband and I, we were actually going to live in London. But because he's a musician and during COVID, there was nothing happening. And my grandmother was alone in Japan, and my whole family, they all have Canadian citizenship. So we weren't allowed into this country during COVID unless there was some kind of, I don't know, emergency. I think they allowed emergency visas, but it's a long process. So if something had happened to my grandmother, no one could come to her. So I decided that I would, you know, get a Haigusha visa and move to Japan to be closer to her. And I'm so glad that I did that. Because I got to spend a couple really precious years with her before she passed away last year. Yes, so I decided to move to Japan, and I interviewed for many different jobs. As you're aware, they're hungry for bilingual professionals in Japan. And so there were a lot of opportunities, but I was really mindful about what company to join because I already know how difficult it is to work for a traditional Japanese company. I've heard all the stories.
Right.
And everyone told me, like, Nanako, don't work for a Japanese company. Like, yeah, like, don't do it. Like, even my Japanese colleagues were like, yeah, like, don't work for a Japanese company. Because they knew me and knew how I was, you know, they were looking out for me. Yeah. And, you know, instead of taking maybe a higher position with a higher salary at a more prominent company, I chose Tableau because I knew the team and their values and philosophy of, you know, like helping people, being really open-minded. And even my Japanese colleagues are all so great. Like, even if they don't speak English or have lived abroad, you know, they're very open-minded and very supportive. So there's like no judgment. And, you know, they help me improve my Japanese every day. And so I felt like it was a really safe place to improve my Japanese. and learn the cultural, like business mannerisms and rules of Japanese society. So this is why I call it slow integration, because I didn't have to learn everything right away.
Yeah.
And also it was during COVID, so nothing was open. None of the meetings were in person. Like there weren't a lot of interactions in person, no events. And so I really got to like slowly like integrate into Japanese society. So in the beginning, everything was closed. So it was just like me and my husband, like not being able to meet anybody. But I was working like online, improving my online communication skills, especially like writing, like messaging on Slack, or, you know, like business emails, things like this. And then, you know, things started to open up and I felt more confident with my Japanese. And I was asked last year to speak at Women in Localization Japan chapter. And I talked about something similar about how I localized myself. It wasn't this organized though. My thoughts were kind of all over the place at the time, but it was still such a huge milestone for me to speak in Japanese. And they had asked me to speak a little bit in English as well. And they were all laughing because I'm like a different person when I speak in English. I speak in Japanese.
Yes, yeah.
Do you also have like different personas when you speak in other languages?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's unconscious.
It's unconscious.
You're not even conscious of it.
No, it's, you know, when it's interesting you ask that question, because we very seldom pay attention to how we change our personas when we speak in different languages. But it's so obvious when you see the same person do that within a period of 10 minutes, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even your behavior, like the example I've given before is, if I'm in a room full of Americans or maybe Canadians too, and let's say the room is really hot, and I know everybody really well, I might yell across the room to Bob. I say, "Hey, Bob, man, it's like a furnace in here. Open the window, would you?" You know, and that's how I would say it, right? But if I were in the same room with a bunch of Japanese, I would quietly turn to the person to my right and say, "What's going on? It's more of an indirect approach. You're suggesting that maybe somebody should open the window, but you don't make that direct, you know." And I have a friend from New York who's a flight attendant on Hawaiian Airlines, and he said, when inside the plane is really cold, the Japanese will look at you with these puppy dog eyes and they're shivering, but they won't say anything. But he goes, the New Yorkers would say, "Hey, it's like a freezer in here," and he is like, there's that difference in direction. So those kind of differences are almost unconscious. You know what I mean? That's so interesting. But the other thing I wanted to say is like, one, it's so important to connect with the right people when you come here. And some of it's luck of the draw, and some of it in your case was very deliberate and strategic how you approached it. But you did it. You connected with kindred spirits, might be too strong a word, but people you felt comfortable with. And then what I really like what you did, because I kind of did the same thing. When I was in the world and my Japanese wasn't always like, Keigo level, I would actually preface everything by saying, "Sumimasen, mo Keigo benkyou busoku desu no de," and so one, I would apologize up front. And then rather than worrying about it, I would tap into them as to be my teachers. And the Japanese love teaching you. And if they see, what I'm saying? If they see you're very humble and you're asking for help, they cut you slack and they will teach you once you develop that relationship. So I think maybe that was part of you adjusting, like every day you're dealing with these people. That's kind of what I'm reading into it.
Yeah, no, it's really great that you mentioned that, because I did the same thing, because like my boss and I, we had a meeting before I started working, and one of the things we had to establish was how I display my name. Like, do I change my name to something like Nancy so that people know that I'm not Japanese? So we decided not to. As you can see, I'm Nanako.
You don't look like a Nancy anyway.
Well, I like my name, so I'm glad we didn't change it. But like Nanako, Aramaki Nanako, it's so Japanese, right? And I look Japanese. And even 3 years ago, when I spoke in Japanese, I didn't have an accent. So people would assume that I'm native Japanese who grew up in Japan. And so that could cause some issues when speaking with partners or, clients. So what we did was, in the beginning, Yuichi, my boss, whenever we were in like a client meeting, when we met new Japanese people online, he always made a point to introduce me as a Canadian. Like, oh, like she looks and sounds like this, but she's actually Canadian. And we'd all have a good laugh. And then they'd be like, wow, you're Canadian. Your Japanese is really great. So that preface is really important, and it's really helped me because it adds a little cushion, and manage people's expectations.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Hey, hi guys. Thank you. Good morning. Hi Nanako-san. Thank you for the very interesting story. So I was thinking because the team made a great point, making a great connection when you try to enter into a new culture. It seems like your boss is a great guy, for introducing you as a Canadian. And I was thinking, what if, like at the sort of professional setting, then like a non-Japanese people are there, and then you need to introduce that person to the Japanese clients. Can the Japanese help? Like they say I'm a non-Japanese professional, and then you are my colleague, and let's say you are Japanese. Can that Japanese person, do something to sort of ease me into that particular meeting?
Yeah, I think so. I think it really helps to, instead of like announcing yourself, it always helps when someone else says it for you, right? I feel like the message is stronger.
Yes.
So like if I feel like you feel uncomfortable being asked a particular question, maybe I can take over and be like, oh, like so-and-so, may not know that answer, but I can help out. Or, preface and say like, oh, so-and-so actually didn't grow up in Japan. Let me help out. Maybe something like that could help.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Because I was thinking for this, room, and there are some people maybe listening in, wondering, like, hey, I don't have a Japanese background at all, right? And then, so for those, those new entrant into Japan, how the people around the person can help? That's what I was thinking. Anyway, yeah, that's a great response. Thank you.
Yeah, like, I mean, I ask a lot of questions to my Japanese colleagues. I mean, we work mostly remotely. So a lot of the questions are around like how to phrase certain words or messages in Japanese. And depending on situations, the answer is really different. So I always ask my Japanese colleagues for their input. But I feel like they've always been really supportive. So even if I ask like, oh, is this normal or is this correct how I handled this situation, they always give me feedback. And so I think that as a Japanese person with foreigners, as colleagues, I think just making yourself available to them and letting them know that you're open to helping out, that could make a huge difference.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that Maya and I talk about a lot is, there's this image when you say the Japanese of this completely monolithic culture. And anybody who lives here knows how untrue that is. There are even like the people that you work with is proof that there are a lot of different kind of Japanese people. And I believe through my experiences, there are a lot more very open-minded and creative Japanese that people realize because they don't toot their own horn. They don't brag about themselves, but you see these pockets of talent and I think a lot of creativity and free thinking. So that's a really important thing. Like, who do you connect with when you come here? Because there's a lot of different kinds of people here that may fit your personality or not. And so some of it's luck of the draw. But in your case, again, as I mentioned before, it was kind of deliberate. It was strategic, which is the right way to do it, I think. I really do.
Yeah, thank you. I feel like, so when I first came to Japan, of course, I had a few friends already. You know, I have family here. Some of my colleagues that I worked with in London, the ones that had moved back to Japan, I was able to connect with them. I have some osana najimi that I was friends with, you know, back in Canada, and they had moved back to Japan. I connected with them. And so also friends through my husband. So my husband's a musician. So a lot of his friends are super open-minded and, you know, maybe not the typical Japanese person. They know how to express themselves, and they've most likely, most of them have worked abroad on tours. So they have been exposed to different cultures and different languages. So they're not like surprised when I do something that's not Japanese, or know how to express myself sometimes. And so they've been great. Like, I've made a few close friends through my husband, and they've been really, really great. And then also, I started to dance flamenco again after a few years hiatus.
Nice.
I got introduced into the community earlier last year. And so I'm really glad that I didn't jump right into it. I was a little bit afraid because I know it's such a big community in Japan and they're all so good that I felt like there was no room for me. But then there was one opportunity to perform, and the guitarist really loved me. And I was really fortunate enough that everyone that I had met were really lovely and open-minded and not like, oh, who's this new person? Like, everyone in the Japanese flamenco community so far has been super welcoming. And you never know, because I've already done this several times, like entering a new market, you know, as a professional flamenco dancer. And it's really interesting how people like sort of handle that. Because, for example, when I first arrived in London, and there was like a Facebook group for flamencos in London. And I was like, hi, I just moved here. Like, I'm open to teaching. Like, please contact me or whatever. Like, I gave a little introduction. And someone had flagged that content to the group admin. And so, you know, people are going to always feel threatened. And I know that can happen anywhere. So I've always made a conscious effort to not come in so strong. And so in Japan, I really didn't want to do that. I really wanted to avoid that, getting like a bad reputation. But I was really lucky, and I got introduced, and I started performing every month. And everyone's been so lovely. And I think it really helps to have like a common hobby, or, you know, something that you have in common with the other person. And so I've made a lot of new friends in the Japanese flamenco community. And, you know, they're also really used to expressing themselves, and a lot of them are direct and speak Spanish, or they've lived in Spain for a little bit, which I also did. I forgot to mention, I lived in Spain for a year as well. And I speak Spanish as well. So I felt like I could really connect with these flamenco colleagues because of that common ground.
Listening to you, just to your story today, I think I figured out what your secret sauce is. You are so humble, and you have approached the entire process with humility. And I think you come across as very genuine and authentic and likable, probably because of that. Aww. And I think you're the kind of person people want to be around and get to know you. And, so I think that's your secret sauce.
That's my secret sauce. Oh, thank you. I'm flattered. But it really helps.
It helps a lot.
Yeah. It does.
Like, especially for like typical Japanese people who have never really, befriended a foreigner. They don't know what to expect. And so I feel like I really consciously try not to make people feel uncomfortable. So like Tim, like how you said, if you're in a room with Japanese people, you wouldn't shout, close the window. It's the same thing, right? Like just being mindful and not being rude. It seems so simple, but if you don't have that self-awareness, it's so easy to offend people, or, maybe make them feel uncomfortable that they don't want to approach you.
Yeah. I wonder, when did you feel that, were you so aware or self-aware when you were in Canada before you lived overseas, or did that awareness develop with your first move to a different country?
That's a really great question. Thank you. Yeah. So for my first job in Canada, I was doing marketing for a coffee franchise company. And I was still pretty young, but I was like training franchisees. And the franchisees had, all types of different backgrounds. It was such an interesting job. So a lot of people who immigrate to Canada, they come from, all different types of backgrounds and countries. And some of them were like doctors in India, or, like a lawyer in Korea. And they wanted to invest in Canada. And I believe that's how you get citizenship. It's a really easy way to get Canadian citizenship if you start a business. And so you had all these really, really brilliant professionals from different countries with different accents and, different mannerisms. And I had to speak English very clearly so that they could understand me, and approach them, with an open mind and not judge them, and try to train them on like customer service and local marketing practices in a way that is easy to digest. And I think maybe that helped me with, all the different new cultures that I entered, because I knew about, just how different people can be.
Wow. That's
Yeah, I would say, yes, I asked you the question because we see that, and it could be personality, it could be anything else, but also that some people are more easily adaptable, let's say, to, different cultural, let's say, cultural differences, and they're more aware of them, of course, more self-aware, and so on. And sometimes Tim and I talk, and we have come to the kind of conclusion that it does take a certain type of personality at the end. To people, not everybody can actually adapt to life overseas, life in a culture which is different from theirs. So that's why I asked you, and thank you so very much for the answer. It was really, really great.
Yeah, Naya, that's a great question. And then Nanako-san, that was a great response. Can I be honest? Because I'm known to be very blunt, even though I'm 100% Japanese. And my American husband said, "Oh, you are so no PC, like I cannot be politically correct. So let me just, but I don't have anything, in between lines. So, and then, I just come from the curiosity. I have to say, when you start talking, I thought, because okay, yeah, so you have a great personality, you're very personable, and then you have like seems like a great connection from get go, and then maybe localization was easy for you, and then maybe, and then I'm sorry, I got that impression. But when you said, sort of you in Canada, like a sort of need to talk to those people from all over the world with a so diverse background, that you learned how to talk to people, really talk to people. And I thought that's maybe how you got to where you are. So my apologies from jump to conclusion. And it seems like probably it wasn't easy for you. You earned it. You earned the localization for you. So thank you for sharing the story. And that was, again, Maya, thank you for the question.
Oh no, thanks, Yuka. And so since you started talking about localization, Yuka, I have a question to you, Nanako. So on LinkedIn, you have been running a series of posts about localization and tips about localization here. So would you like to tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. It's just work has been so busy that I had to kind of like force myself to post at least once a week. So I'm committing myself to posting once a week. And so, with everything that I've been doing, since I was working for SoftBank in London, has been giving tips on how to localize for the Japanese market. And so I've gained a lot of insights over the last few years, and much more since living in Japan and working with Japanese people, and especially with my global clients. A lot of clients work for multinational corporations, and they need to communicate with their Japanese counterparts in Japan, and they need to run a global campaign that needs to get localized for Japan. And we end up being sort of like the middleman negotiator that sort of like, communicates between the two teams. And for me, it's been really rewarding to be that person, but you really need to understand both cultures and maybe multiple cultures to be able to have empathy for the various different groups of people. And I feel like that's been a huge thing for me is having empathy. Because if you don't understand where the other person's coming from, it's really difficult to convince them that it's the right thing to do if they don't feel like it is. So I feel like that's really helped. And a lot of these things that I've learned along the way, I'm sure some people have already like turned them into a book or something. And there are tons of great people on LinkedIn that are sharing their insights already. And I get a lot of inspiration from a lot of those people on LinkedIn. But I thought I'd share my 2 cents too, especially because my specialty is in digital marketing. And I manage a lot of digital ad campaigns that have been localized from like the global campaigns to the Japanese campaigns. And because we're a content marketing agency, we're not an ad agency. We don't just run ad campaigns. We start from the messaging and localizing the messages and getting a copywriter to write the ad copy and getting a professional graphic designer who's Japanese to localize the graphics into something that is appropriate for the Japanese market. So we really approach it like holistically. And I think a lot of people don't have that kind of access to that knowledge. And so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, because I have been following the series and I enjoy every post you have put out there.
Thank you.
So
Yeah, I
thank
think
you.
I'm gonna run out of ideas soon, though.
Well, but you always learn, and I think that yes, we when we start something, in the beginning it looks like, oh, I have so many things that I want to share. On the way, gradually, it feels like we are, getting maybe towards the end of the ideas and so on. But then suddenly, something new comes up, and then another tip. It just appears, because of what happened or because of a client or maybe something that you talked about with a colleague in the office. So I think that, I cannot be sure, of course, but I very much hope that you're going to keep pushing those posts out.
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll do my best.
Yeah.
So Nanako-san, what is your 2 cents? I know that's kind of weird way of asking. So I believe that you said, a lot of people are posting the probably similar contents, but probably your content is yours only, yours alone. So I'm sure your 2 cents can add up to maybe $2 million. So what is so your content? Because I am posting sometimes, and I get that it's posting once a week is such a hustle, but how you differentiate your content?
Ooh, in that
So
sense,
it's like your experience is very everyone's experience is probably different. So that's how you sort of put yourself out there, or I'm sorry, am I asking a tough? I tend to do that. So if you
no, it's totally fine. I mean, I'd be happy for you to connect with me on LinkedIn and you can see all of my posts. I think I'm up to tip number 11.
Yeah.
So hopefully I can continue for a while. I don't know if my content is unique because I feel like a lot of people are posting a lot of great tips out there already. But I try to speak from the heart, and a lot of it is based on my experiences, but not mine alone. Like my experience working with all these different multinational companies, or my experience working with my Japanese clients or my Japanese colleagues. And also my experience as a Japanese consumer being treated as a Japanese person in Japan, but with the mindset of a foreigner.
That's interesting.
Yes.
That's unique.
I
Yeah.
think, yeah.
That's a good point.
That's a great differentiator. Great thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
and I think that's something that I only realized recently. I think in the last post, I was just saying, I think this is where I can bring value
Yes.
to my audience, is most of my followers are foreigners living in Japan, or foreigners living abroad interested in the Japanese market, or Japanese nationals who have lived abroad that have come back to Japan or live abroad. And so I think maybe some of the Japanese people who have come back to Japan might have the same experience that I'm going through. But I'm Canadian, really, at heart,
Yeah.
And so I have basically improved my Japanese skills to a point where people have no idea that I didn't grow up in Japan, unless, it's on a subject that happened, in 2010, and I don't know that specific artist, for example. Or some jargon, and they'd be like, "What? You don't know what this means?" And then I have to be like, "Actually, I've only lived in Japan for 3 years." So yes, my experience here, I feel like, is quite unique. I have a friend in Canada who lived in Japan, in Tokyo, for 3 years, and his Japanese is perfect. He's super fluent. And on the phone, you would think he's Japanese, but because he's Caucasian, he's experienced some racism, unfortunately, or being treated differently. And I'm sure, there are some positives around that too, right, Tim and Maya? Like you can say, oh, like, I don't know that because I'm foreign, but I can't do that.
I feel like xenophobia is maybe a little bit better descriptor
Yes, yes.
Just
Yeah.
you're an outsider. You're not, you're not part of this little thing, So
Exactly. And it's not like, you're right, sorry. It's not like they're racist. They just are afraid of, they don't know how to deal with foreigners, I
Exactly.
suppose.
Yeah.
For some people, it can be a frightening thing to take
Yeah.
on.
Yeah, it is. But also there's a way to overcome that too, on one-on-one levels in the relationships that you
Yes.
develop, right? But yeah,
Definitely.
I see it as a challenge.
That's good.
know?
You see,
Yeah.
it's so important to have a positive mindset. So
And actually, I do want to, like, that point, I want to kind of go back to a little story you told that says a lot about your character. So, we're talking about the fact that you're resilient, you are adaptable to different cultures, which is true. But you talked about when you injured yourself. Okay. That's a setback. And some people will feel sorry for themselves and say, oh my God, what am I going to do? And you took that as an opportunity to launch yourself in a new direction, to learn more, but to focus on Japan. And to me, just that little tidbit, that story says a lot about who you are, because you're not only adaptable to different cultures, you're adaptable to whatever life throws at you, and you figure out how to deal with it, and then you move on. And so I think that's also maybe part of your secret sauce. But so that impressed me, the way you dealt with that, And I have a son who's a break dancer who just snapped his Achilles, and
oh no.
he's going to be out, it takes what, 9-10 months to really,
Right.
get back.
Oh.
So he's lost his passion. Like, that's not his full-time job, obviously. I don't think there's too many, break dancers making money, but he loves it. And so he's dealing with it mentally. Right. And,
Yes.
and he's doing well, but so that kind of resonated with me. And when we first talked, I think I mentioned that to you.
You did mention the dance connection. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I thought about my future and how difficult it would be. I mean, even from the beginning, like becoming like only having dance as a skill, I always felt was a bit risky. And I always felt very fortunate, especially during COVID, that I had these, excuse me, other marketing skills and language skills, things that I could do from home with my computer, because I saw that, like my husband lost all of his work. All of my friends, they couldn't dance, and I think in London, it's still not the same. And so it's really tough. And I feel very fortunate to have other skills.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Don't take it for granted.
You're so positive, and that's sort of, I think, that's made us all feel good here. Thank you. By the way, I have to ask you, is that okay? I'm sorry, am I too loud?
Please.
Like that. We were talking about generation gap, between my Japanese friends, and then, me, and like I lived here from, more than, I'm living in Dallas, by the way. Maybe I didn't introduce myself, for 20 years. So I'm a little behind with the Japanese, the newer lingos. Do you guys know what the JK stands for? I just learned it.
Joke?
No, that's Joshikose.
Oh.
Yes.
My Jesus, people. I'm also, so they usually talk about that. So she's just a JK, and like, okay, what's JK? And they're like, oh, Joshikose, and I'm like,
really?
Of course. Yeah.
But anyway, I'm sorry.
That's unexcusable.
But it's not that unusual, because I listen to Japanese dramas just to improve my vocabulary, and they'll come up with a word I never heard, and I'll ask my wife, and she's like, I never heard that word either. So she's a native speaker as well. So it's not that uncommon. So
that's true. Like, I don't have a lot of interactions with like joshikoses or anyone who's like younger than 25. So
right.
I'm not up to date, and I don't watch Japanese TV anymore. We don't have a TV at my home right now. So
I do Netflix. Mine are all on Netflix. I
watch TVer and Netflix. Yeah. But yeah. a lot of those terms do show up on those TV shows, and that helps. But yeah, it helps if I guess you're talking to a lot of different people from different generations.
Yeah, I guess so. But I am amazed, Yuka, what you said about ChatGTP, that, well, it knew that word. And, it's amazing how fast it has learned, actually. So amazing
But by
indeed.
the way, you probably can do business without knowing JK, okay? So don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, but it helps to know it, when you have friendly conversations and so on. But okay, thank you very much for this. It's already 9 o'clock, and this is usually the time when we say goodbye to everybody and wish them happy midweek. So, Nanako, thank you so very much for being with us. Before we close, I once again want to say that this Saturday we have an event in Odawara, West Odawara. So this is a hike. It is a 3 or 4 hour hike, and it will be guided by Richard Walton, who is with us in Clubhouse. And if your schedule permits, please do join us. I have shared the registry can continue the conversation at some point in the near future. And Tim, thank you very much for chiming in with the great questions. And Yuka, to you too. I love your questions all the time. And yes, the freshness and everything. Thank you. Okay, so Nanako, maybe. Thank you. And a few words from you in conclusion before we say goodbye to everybody.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking about this. I feel like it's just my life, and I don't know if it helps people, but I really, I want to, I don't know, create a community and help people, if possible. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to connect with you on LinkedIn, and you can directly ask me any question you might have.
Yes, thank you very
welcome
much.
to our community.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for joining us. Well, now I usually say please put your best smile, but today we have this one. Okay, so closing frame. Well, that's all for today. To everybody who's kept with us, thank you, and have a great midweek. That was all.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.